Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Quick announcement, our fabulous sponsor, IT Pro TV, has updated their course library. Latest updates are available for classes in CCNA Security, CEH version 9, Metasploit, and Red Hat Linux. So make sure you check them out at itpro.tv/ whatever it says on the graphic in the beginning. Is ES30?
That's the one. That's where you want to go.
Yeah. Use the discount code ES30. That's right. itpro.tv. Sweet. All righty. Oh, so we're talking about IoT. Oh my! Is every article that I read is just all IoT is bad. They hacked IoT and they created DDoS. So we should actually start paying attention to these embedded systems and IoT devices. And oh my God, IoT devices have default passwords. I'm like, okay. 1999 called. They want their headlines back. It's just deplorable. But maybe it's good. I mean, Bruce Schneier did say that in his article about IoT security that he wrote a few years ago, said that things would get worse before they would get better. And certainly there's been no shortage of IoT devices that have vulnerabilities and security issues. However, all of a sudden, there's the largest distributed denial of service attack in history uses IoT devices, and now everyone is publishing articles about how to secure them. So having some experience in this area, which is kind of funny, I put together IoT devices in the enterprise. What should enterprises do about this IoT problem? I think we can move past the fact that these devices pose a threat. And also let's move past that, I don't have any IoT devices on my network, because today in 2016, you got IoT devices on your network. Am I right or am I right?
I think you're right. And what was the website that we started 3 years ago? It was basically, you kind of sounded the alarm about vulnerabilities that are embedded in these particular devices. I think there was security, a book that came out.
Securityfail.com.
Yep, SecurityFail.
Which was ironic.
We were going to start a movement, and
we let
no one followed.
No, what did we do? We put up a website on securityfail.com, and it was amazing how many people would try and hack securityfail.com. In fact, we tested out a lot of offensive countermeasures on securityfail.com because so many people would just try and hack it just for the irony of it all. And then we were hosting on a virtual hosting provider, and we just killed it. Like, I got tired of trying to defend it, and I'm like, screw it. I just killed the virtual hosting provider and just canceled my subscription and let the IP address go off in the ethers. However, I left the DNS entry. So someone gets that IP address reassigned to them and puts up a securityfail.com website making fun of us for doing that. So it wasn't really hacked. It was just, someone else.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
But, it was almost like another thing that was like 2-3 years in advance, right? It was like, we're going to go try and find vulnerabilities in Internet of Things. No one really followed at all. But you talked about that botnet. I mean, really? Telnet, default credentials, largest botnet or largest DDoS attack in history? Just from Telnet, default credentials.
Telnet.
That's insane.
Only on port 2323 and 23, mind
That's
you.
It. That's it.
That's crazy.
And if anybody wants to get into like the IoT level hacking stuff, we did a video, a webcast a while ago at Security Weekly. If you just Google "We Can Hardware Hack" and you can too, you pull up the video and you guys can see, how to basically use JTAG, JTAGulator, bus pirate, and basically pull down firmware and break into things and start pulling off those default credentials. So check it out. I mean, this stuff isn't hard. It's not rocket science. And our con that's coming up that people are now like, what con is coming up? Stay tuned. We're going to be having a conference about a year from now. We're going to have a hardware hacking village. We'll have like 4 or 5 things that you can actually break into and see how easy this is to do. And we'll be there to hold your hand the whole way.
That's awesome. So I wrote up some points for people who work in the enterprise that some tips on IoT device security. And the first thing I mentioned is you got to find all the devices on your network. I think we've talked about this a lot in the past, and I think you should not be afraid to scan for these devices on your network or look into your existing scans to see what exists. I often find after my kind of a long stint in vulnerability management that many vulnerability management tools will kind of back off and be really nice if it's an embedded system to avoid crashing it, which speaks to how fragile these devices are. But I think in today's day and age, there are some safe and tried and true methods to discovering all these devices in your network, and not just looking on the wire. You got to look in the wireless space as well.
And that's where a lot of these things end up under desks, and nobody knows where they're actually at. So, okay, so I got a question for you, Paul. If scanning these things is bad, right? You might run into a SCADA PLC toaster or whatever, and it causes it to crash, causing mass panic, hysteria, death. What are some other ways that you can discover these devices without actually scanning for them?
Well, you can sniff the network, John. Why not?
Absolutely.
I mean, a lot of these devices do. When we transitioned over time from calling these embedded systems to Internet of Things. Internet implies that it connects out to the internet, which many of these devices do. Some just for sheer updates, not really, but others to really interact with the purpose of the device. So, as you know, most of us know, the device connects up to the cloud, and then you've got a mobile app that connects into the cloud, or you have a web interface that you go to the cloud to manage all of your IoT devices. So the fact that if it's on your network, it's going to make a connection out to the internet means you could probably sniff that traffic and fingerprint it and determine which devices are on your network passively, which is awesome.
Yep. And a lot of times that can be done with user agent strings, and tools like Bro have the capability of automatically inventorying user agent strings in your environment as one of the logs that they drop.
Yep. So finding is important. And obviously one of the largest threats is the default or backdoor credentials. And it's interesting how people have been kind of hesitant to actually log into one of these devices in fear that it might break. However, I've always stated, John, that logging into a device and testing a couple of different passwords, even if it's 40 or 50, if you do it slowly enough, shouldn't impact the device because it's expected behavior, right? The device is expecting that if I'm running Telnet and there's a prompt for a username and password, that someone's going to make a TCP connection, they're going to send me a username and password, and I'm going to verify if that's true. That's expected behavior. Right? That's not flooding the username field to see if there's a buffer overflow. That's putting in a username and password. So I've always held true to the fact that you can test for these default or backdoor credentials in these devices more safely than you can for lots of other vulnerabilities. And lo and behold, this largest DDoS botnet was just really, they would do this exact scanning. And if you're building a botnet and you're testing for 40 or 50 different credentials, you're not intentionally trying to crash the device, because if you crash the device, you're not going to be able to use it in your botnet. So the attackers know this and they're doing it. What I'm saying is you should do it first.
Yep. And when you're doing that, there's a couple of tips. If you're using a tool like Hydra or X-Hydra, I wouldn't recommend X-Hydra. I always run it from the command line, but that's another story. Whenever you're running these tools that actually brute force user IDs and passwords, you should first use a really good password set. Don't try to spray 40,000, a million passwords. Choose like the top 20 commonly used passwords. Also, reduce the number of threads that you're going to run. A lot of these tools, for example, Hydra, I think it does 32, 34, 35 threads simultaneously, and that'll overrun the service. It won't be able to respond to anything. It just basically shuts the service down so you can't log into it. And that's also the same issue that you run into with SSH. So we recommend tuning your tool that's going to try to find the credentials in your own IoT level devices. Tune it down to about 2 or 3 threads, maybe even 1 or 2, and you'll have a much higher likelihood of actually finding these devices with really poor passwords. If you kick up the threads to the full 36 and let it run, there's a very strong possibility you're going to find no passwords whatsoever. Slow down, take your time. You're not going to overwhelm the device, and you're going to have a higher likelihood of finding some vulnerabilities in your own devices.
Yeah, I want to go back to network monitoring as well, because I think that not just the user agent strings, John, I think there's a lot of protocols that you can look at too, and a lot of just analyzing network traffic. I mean, this is somewhat self-serving as we our company, Offensive Countermeasures, one of the things we do a lot of is look at network traffic, right? And we tend to find all kinds of things, not just by user agent, but the protocols they're using, the behavior. It's like you can tell it's not a server or desktop, like it's some other kind of device. It's using some weird protocol like UPnP, some kind of broadcast request. I've seen it even with the projects that we've done, like from JOF, the Tachyon.net, which collects all of the responses and stuff from DNS black holing. That listens on all these ports. And when you start that, start up a service, just start up a sniffer. I mean, and you'll see all this traffic. So collecting and analyzing it. We talked about Gigamon before. That's great. We talked about Bro. Bro is probably the best solution because it's free, right? Provided you can get the right hardware. The best solution to just start looking through your Bro logs. And I bet you could probably find tutorials on the internet that tell you how to find like weird devices.
Yep. Absolutely. And we're huge fans of Bro for a variety of reasons. It can handle the bandwidth, it gives you the visibility, and we use it at the heart of everything that we do as well.
And we're finding a lot of enterprises use Bro. I was actually surprised by that, to be honest with you, John. Maybe I'm still in my late 90s. Like, we can't use open source because there's no support contract. I mean, that's largely out the window. So open source is great.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting whenever you talk about Bro. Bro's been around for a long time, and it used to always be this fringe group of academics that would use Bro. Everybody else was using Snort.
Yeah.
And I think it took people a long time to realize that Bro was more of a language and a capture engine for querying information from your network traffic, not necessarily an intrusion detection system.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the most important advice, and you very rarely hear me make this recommendation. However, in the circumstances that we're in today, when you have Internet of Things devices in your enterprise, there's going to be certain situations where network segmentation's really your only hope. And that is because of a couple of things. One, the IoT device vendors may not be providing updates and patching things. Two, you may not be able to change some of the credentials to log into some of these systems. Sometimes firmware is just backdoored, and you can't change that password. Three, speaking of things you can't change, sometimes you can't change the port, you can't disable the service, and you can't change the password. So that's very, very limiting from a security standpoint, pretty much leaving you with network segmentation. And that means taking all of your IoT devices. You're not going to be able to take them all off the network because someone's probably using them for something. I mean, people need their projectors and a TV and God knows what inside of your network, right? And I even saw this in my own small little network that we have here for the studio. We have a device. It accepts Telnet. There's no password. I can't even put a password on it if I wanted to. And I'm like, well, that's bad. So what you end up doing is connecting a Raspberry Pi to it, and the Raspberry Pi is the conduit to the internet, and that's a form of segmentation. In enterprise networks, you have a lot more and better tools to segment all of these devices off on their own. And I just don't mean the wired, too. The wireless as well. Create separate wireless networks for these devices to connect to with the maximum security that they'll allow on those devices, and just heavily segment. You don't want these on your production networks. You just don't.
And this is the one thing, you kind of end with it. This is the one thing that the vast majority of organizations fail miserably at. Mm-hmm. And it's probably one of the easier things to do.
I mean, when you get up around 10,000 devices on your network, segmentation starts to get really hard. And then, multiply that out. We've got customers, John, that have a lot more than 10,000 devices on their network, in different locations. So segmentation does become extremely difficult. But as we've often seen in security, the more difficult things have some of the higher rewards. And I think that, we've seen our fair share of, we called them embedded devices, but IoT devices on people's networks that have led to some disastrous security consequences, largely could have been fixed by the things that we mentioned, right? Make sure you know about them. Change all the default passwords, turn off all the services and lock it down the best you can, and then put it on a completely separate network. If you do those very simple things, you're doing it right when it comes to IoT security in the enterprise.
Absolutely.
Now, there's other situations, too, that we haven't talked. I mean, what if you have to actually interface with these IoT devices in your phone and in the cloud? You know, that's a kind of a different thing. Although a lot of the, I don't know how many
your
IoT
Raspberry Pi solution still works for that, Paul. I mean, you could set up a Raspberry Pi in front of it, use a key-based authentication to SSH into it. Yeah, there's solutions to this, even if they're in weird places that you can actually lock these things down. Sometimes you just got to get creative.
We need to run a segment. I want to bring people on that are actually doing this. Like if you work for an enterprise level company and you're using Raspberry Pis in your security solutions, like I want to hear from you. I want to bring you on the show because I think that's awesome. It's awesome. I have to be honest, I haven't been a huge Raspberry Pi fan up until the Pi 3 Model B came out. I think it has enough features and enough horsepower to actually be useful on the network. So if you're using Raspberry Pis in your enterprise, please tell us. And good Lord, change the password on your Raspberry Pis because it's default.
Beat me to it.
That's important. Well, awesome. That concludes this episode. Again, make sure you email sales@offensivecountermeasures.com if you want to check in with John and myself and the fabulous team that we've put together to bring an awesome product to market in the threat hunting space primarily. So sales@offensivecountermeasures.com. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching Enterprise Security Weekly. That's it for this week.